That's bright. I talked about Jersey Mike's the other day. I had a soda. Some people commented on, and it was a root beer fountain drink. I like sub sandwich shops, sub shops. Jersey Mike's is good. Subway is good, even though the subs aren't as good. But what? What are you talking about? What do you mean I'm running out of things to talk about? I don't think so. We're talking about everything. We talked about pool halls and refrigerators and uh, inviting cell phones into the pool and stuff like that. We've been talking about, great. These are great things to talk. I could talk all day about this stuff. Steve Weiner here from GetRubix.com, and in our last part of I don't know how many parts this is, of our working with Intune through the Graph PowerShell SDK, we're going to talk about building something a little bit larger to help us look for problems and solve them, and just kind of how we approach the whole process. So, enjoy. These are great stories. Okay, so following up from last time, looks like I accidentally deleted the script we used, but we've basically been working a lot with the Cmdlets for working with the Microsoft Graph, things like get mg device management, manage devices, gets our Intune devices. We've been working with users. We started working with putting together our own graph requests where we're invoking things like invoke mg graph request. We put these web requests together where we can invoke them. So we even had got a basic function going. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about how we can get this going to a point where we can build a script using everything we know how to do now and have it look to maybe solve problems. So instead of us going and say, hey, I'm going to change the primary user, let me look to see if a device needs that. So here's how we're going to do that. Okay, so as always, we're going to flesh some stuff out. So the first thing we're going to have to do is get all Windows devices in tenant. I should probably explain what I'm doing first. What I want to do is I want to solve for the problem of when you look at Intune, right? So if we were going to go look at our Intune devices, between devices and users, there's always some cleanup that has to be done. One of the things is primary users, and we talked about this with changing the primary user, but you can have devices. Why is this not loading as I'm talking? This is aggravating me. We have a problem today? It's not even Thursday. Okay, so you can see here we have devices without a primary user. So that's an issue right there if someone doesn't have a primary user. But another attribute here we can take a look at is what if the primary user isn't correct? So if we take a look in the Microsoft Graph here, I'm going to let me run this query on this device. So I'm looking at a single device here, and there is an attribute that captures not just the primary user, but the users logged on. And what this user ID gives us is the current logged in user, or the last logged in user, we can think of it as. So if we have a situation where this is different from the primary user, where there is no primary user, we can set our script up to make graph calls to fix this for us. And that's what we're going to do here. So we need to get the devices first. Then we need to basically loop through devices, and then for each device we're going to have to get the device ID, device name, primary user name, primary user ID, and we're going to look for we'll call it the last logged on username, and then the last logged on user ID. No consistency at all in that line, huh? So basically what we're going to do is we're going to do something like for each X in all devices, for each iteration. Actually, let me make a giant comment bracket for this. For each iteration in all devices, we're going to get all that device info, right? And we're going to say if the primary user is empty, make the last logged on user the primary user. Else if the primary user, the last logged on user is not equal to primary user. Same thing, make the last user the primary user. And then finally, else, just leave things alone. So that's the thinking here of what we're going to do. Now, what should you do this, right? This is an organization thing, right? Like, so in your company, in your Intune environment, I don't know if you're going to want to necessarily do this, but definitely some kind of cleanup. I'm choosing to make to see maybe devices change hands. I'm currently going to make if you're logged into the device, I'm going to make you a primary user. And then we could drill down into this eventually. But the idea here is not this solution. It's how do we use the graph to solve for it. So the first thing I need to do is what I said, get all devices. So what I can do is use the commandlet, right? And I'll show you here, get device management, manage devices, and I could even say where the operating system is equal to Windows. So I'm avoiding my mobile devices. I could do that, but there is a problem with this. Because people ask me, when do you use the commandlets versus the, your own web requests and the APIs? So if I run this, and I'm going to pull this without grid view, so that we can look at it. I have a lot of attributes, but what I am not going to find here is the user. I've got the primary user, but I don't have the user logged in, that attribute we saw here in the graph, this last logged in user. I don't have that here. So I can't use this module to query that. So I'm going to have to replace this with the graph call, right? So we're going to have to do an invoke mg graph request, and then we're going to have to build our URI. Now I mentioned this the other day, but I do want to touch on how we can build that. So what I'm going to do is set up some variables, a graph one, an Intune one, and a users one. So what this means is I could string together different parts of the graph. So for the first part, so I don't have to keep typing this, I'm going to do graph.microsoft.com/beta. I always use beta. We talked about that, so I'm going to leave that endpoint in as part of it. If you're working on something bigger, you can leave beta out and have different variables if you want to do beta or 1.0. But for the purposes of this, we're just going to do beta. Now for Intune, my endpoint is device management, managed devices. And for users, it's simply users. So I guess I don't need to make that a variable, but I'm going to keep it all concise. So invoke MS Graph request, we need the method, which is get, and then we need the URI. So the URI in this case is going to be graph Intune. And I'm actually going to, instead of doing where object, because I'm making this graph call, I'm going to build the filter right in. So we did this last time. So device management, manage devices, question mark, tick dollar, filter contains operating system, and that is going to be Windows. Okay, so let's run that. And now let's call out grid view. So what happened here? Where's all my values? So this is actually very interesting. When you invoke directly from the graph, you will sometimes get back an object representing the value. So I'm getting back a table of values. So there's really nothing in here. So in order to crack that open, I'm going to wrap all of this in parentheses. And I'm just going to put a dot value at the end. Now, if we run this, now we have the value. So we've cracked it open. Yeah, so you can see users logged on. And in there is a hash table, because if we were to go back here, in users logged on is when they were last logged on and the user ID. And you could even use that reference, like if you've been logged on for over a certain amount of time. We're not going to get into that today, but you could use any of these attributes. So now that we know we can query that value from here, we're going to loop through the devices, and we're going to say for each device in all devices, what did we say we're doing? So we're going to we got to get all this stuff. So how are we going to get all this stuff? So we're going to say device ID, device name, primary username, primary user ID, last logged on username, and last logged on user ID. And that should be enough for us to build this out. So how are we going to get these? So device ID is going to be device.id. The device name is going to be device.device name. Yeah, there it is. Primary username. We can do the user principal name for that, I believe. User display name should be user principal name. Now, the primary user ID, that can be in there, but I'm going to show you, it's in the commandlet, but I'm going to show you how to get that. Because we have the username, we can make a direct call, just like we did up here, for that user and get the ID out of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the primary user ID, because we're going to need that for the user URI to post. So the primary user ID is equal to, I'm going to put this in parentheses, so it's going to be invoke Graph request get, the URI is going to be graph users, and it's going to be the primary username, and that should allow us to then say ID. So it'll invoke that, get the whole object, and get the ID. It shouldn't pull the value because it's just one piece, but we can test that. So let's take that. Invoke Graph request get URI is graph users Luke Skywalker at stevecapacity.com ID. Oh, hold on. Beta Luke Skywalker users. Oh, it didn't grab users? Oh, I didn't run these. That's why. I must have skipped that. Now let's do it. Okay, so here, let's show that one more time. Okay, so it will just return the ID, and that should be fine right there. I forgot to run those variables. Okay, perfect. Last logged on username, that is going to be device. We're going to put that in parentheses. That's going to be device dot users logged on user ID. That should be it. But we'll get to test that. And then the last, oh, sorry, that is the ID. I mixed that up. Sorry. So that's the user ID, and the name is down here. Okay, so then the name of that is, we're just gonna invoke Graph request. So now we have that last logged on ID. We can get the display name, and the display name is more for writing friendly names out. So we don't have to. I mean, that's just for our logging, but it's good to get. Method get URI is graph users and this will be the last logged on user ID. And we want the display name, I believe. With users, it's display name. I have a user here. I can query. It is display name. Yeah, that's good enough. We could do... I mean, if we want the full thing, we could do mail. I mean, either way, if you want to keep it consistent, I'll leave it display name for now. That's fine. Okay, so now that we've done that, we have to basically create all our logic here. So we did that. We'll kill all this because we'll leave it there for now. So for each, and we got all that, and now we have to first check if it's null. If there's no primary user, if the primary username is equal to null, we're going to do some stuff. Else, if the primary username is not equal to, we're going to do this with ID actually. If the primary user ID is not equal to the last logged on user ID, so if they are not equal, that's an action. And then finally, we're just going to report that there is no action. So there's three different scenarios here. So in the first one, if the primary user is empty, if it's null, we're going to write host, and we're going to say device. We'll put the device name for the logs. Device blah 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 does not have a primary user. Setting to last logged in user now. And then we would make our call. So take action. We'll get back to that. And the take action is going to take place in a try catch block, so we can catch errors. Okay? If the primary user ID is not equal to the last login display, then we can say, similar device name has primary username as the primary user. Last logged on username is logged in. Changing now. Again, this is not a full solution. I'm just trying to show you the process. Take action. Try. Catch. Okay. And then else, really take no action. Else write host. Primary username is already the primary user of device name, no action needed. Okay, so if they match, everything's all good. Okay, so now we got to fill this in. So write host device name. If it's wrong, logged in now, we're going to try to, so we have to, in all cases, we have to build, we're going to have to build the device URI and the user URI to post that. And we can do that up here, right? So we can actually probably do that with the rest of our variables. So I'm going to say device URI, user URI. So the device URI is equal to graph Intune users, and then remember this, we did the tick $ref. But we actually have to put the device ID in there. device ID, device ID. There we go. That's UD, not ID. Okay, so graph, Intune device management, device ID, the users, and the reference. Great. The user URI is just the full ID of the last logged in user ID. So that's going to be graph users, and that's going to be last logged on user ID. So now we got to put that in JSON. We could do that here. So if you recall, that was the ID is equal to OData at odata.id, because that's the format it needs to sit in. And then the JSON is equal to script code block of ID is equal to user URI. And that should be it. ID is equal to user URI. Perfect. So we're going to say invoke mg graph request post. The URI is the device URI, and the body is JSON. And then we can say write host primary user name is now primary user of device name. So that's if it's successful. If it's not successful, we're going to say write host error setting. We're actually going to catch the message first. So we're going to say message equals exception dot message, and we're going to say write host error setting primary user as primary user for device name. And we'll throw the error message. Okay. Great. We're going to do the same thing down here. We're going to say device, it's not primary user, last one. Probably just copy that, because that's going to be the same thing. Device name is now primary user of device name. So this is going to be, actually I made a mistake here. This is going to be last logged on username. Device name. Yeah, the primary is the old one. Same last logged in. I'm going to change that here too. Last logged in. Username. Last logged in username. Okay, great. And then we could say primary is already the primary device. Okay, no action needed. Good. We can call that last logged in username, because that means that it's already correct. It's already the last person who signed it in. So I think that's fine. And again, I'm just kind of cobbling this together to show you. Now, when you want to test stuff like this, you just want to make sure the graph calls are working. Biggest recommendation I can give is put a hash comment out of the actual invoke. This will just write stuff out and let us know how we did. So let's see how we did. Yeah, so you can see right here, device M365 does not have a primary user setting now. Rick Jones is now the primary user. Device does not have a primary user setting to last logged in. Luke is already the primary user. So here, device has Jesse Weimer as the primary user. Rick Jones is logged in, changing now. Rick Jones is now the primary user. So this is going to go through and clean things up for us, which is kind of nice. So that's a pretty good example. All right, so the purpose of this wasn't to have a device username cleanup script. I'm not going to post this. It's definitely could use some more work, but it was to show you how we can combine everything we've learned so far with the graph to build something a little more robust, right? And I think that's the cool part. That's the best way to learn, because people always ask me. It's look for a problem you'd like to solve that you can't with the, just going in the Intune GUI. Piece together these things that we've learned and try to come up with something that can solve your problem. If you have questions, if you want to tell me about something cool you got going on, I'd love to hear about it. Jump in the Discord, and we will see you later.
5, 4, 3,